Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and today's guest is Denise Wiesner for our 100th episode, and we'll be speaking on Conceiving with Love. Denise is the author of Conceiving with Love, a whole body approach to creating intimacy, reigniting passion, and increasing fertility. The founder of the Natural Healing and Acupuncture Clinic in West LA, Wiesner is an internationally recognized traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, specializing in the whole systems Chinese medicine approach to women's health, sexuality, and fertility. Since 1994, Denise has treated and helped women manage challenges from menstrual disorders through menopause and from infertility to pregnancy. Using a combination of acupuncture, diet, and lifestyle counseling, nutritional supplements, and Chinese herbs, Denise has helped thousands of couples navigate the tricky and often stressful journey toward fertility without losing their loving connection. Denise teaches professional seminars to medical doctors, OBGYNs, and nurse midwives on the application of Chinese medicine in obstetrics and gynecology, and has published articles on acupuncture and infertility. In addition to a thriving private practice, Denise lectures at conferences, works closely with reproductive endocrinologists, and is a professor in the doctoral program in Chinese medicine, fertility, and women's health at Yosan University. Denise enjoys leading groups for individuals and couples to help their fertility journey, incorporating breath, meditation, and education. Hi, Denise. Welcome to the show. Very excited to have you on today.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
So I'm excited for the listeners of Well-Adjusted Mama to learn more about you and the passion behind the book that you've created here called Conceiving with Love, a whole body approach to creating intimacy, reigniting passion, and increasing fertility. I absolutely love that subtitle. Tell our listeners a little bit about your story and how you've come to essentially become an expert in this area of conceiving from a place of intimacy, passion, and love.
I have been in practice as an acupuncture doctor for over 25 years now. And when I was trying to conceive my second child, it was really difficult. And my first one came naturally, but I found out in the process that I was a Tay-Sachs carrier, and so was my late husband. And Tay-Sachs is a fatal disease where you're missing an enzyme for development. And so my first one that I got pregnant with was fine, and I'm very lucky. And then I followed with a miscarriage, which I was really not prepared for because I thought, I'm healthy, everything should be fine. Mm-hmm. And then 3 months later, I got pregnant again and had a Tay-Sachs baby, and it's a fatal disease. So I had to terminate that, and that was very devastating for me. And there was 2 losses, and really just felt unprepared. And because I'm an acupuncturist, I went to seek all these, natural types of ways to get pregnant. Like I went to naturopaths and acupuncturists, and I even went to a medical doctor, and everybody kind of scratched their head and wanted to give me herbs for my breathing instead of for fertility. And it was not what I wanted. And I decided that I really needed to kind of explore myself what's going on with fertility. So I became very invested in fertility for both women and men. So that's just sort of how I got started.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting. A lot of holistic healers tend to have personal experiences that kind of help drive them or move them forward in their purpose, and why we're on this earth to help and serve. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting. And I do appreciate also that you really are specific about, and even your book as well, about male fertility and female fertility, because I think in general in our culture, a lot of people put a lot of fertility pressure on women, and it does take 2 to create a baby. And it's 50-50, right? So it's really, of course, it makes sense that we would want to support both the male and female partner in being the healthiest version of themselves in order to create a healthy baby.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think the niche that I found myself really in with dealing with a lot of patients these days, and the reason I wrote this book is because I felt like men and women had started having a lot of issues around intimacy and fertility, meaning that the relationship was starting to suffer because women are trying to get pregnant and men sometimes are having issues that nobody's talking about. And the whole kind of, there's no place for couples to go to sort through these various kinds of issues. And usually they're about intimacy and sexuality. So everyone's afraid to talk about that.
Right. So, as I was reading through your book, what really stood out to me is number one, I really appreciated, and this is so funny, and it's something that even really kind of skipped my radar, but just the basic anatomy of how babies are made. Like, it's just so simple in a lot of ways, but something that a lot of people aren't really fully educated on. And I do think it's interesting. There's a lot of shame, I think, that people might have felt like growing up in sex ed class. I know I always felt very uncomfortable when we were talking about that. Probably a lot of fifth and sixth graders can relate to that. But the whole point is that you're not really either one wanting to pay attention, or also I think there's a lot of stuff missing that they don't really bring in there. And then, like, where else are you learning about this unless you go on to become a physician, right? I mean, where else are you getting this type of anatomy and such? So I appreciate that you put that in the book from the very get-go, because if you don't know how all the parts work, then that's can be part of the problem. And then the other part is the sexuality component and the sensuality and the enjoyment and the intimacy and the connection and all those things that are, I think, a beautiful part of conceiving a baby, but are certainly not something that I think a lot of people talk about when they're feeling stressed about making a baby.
Oh, I'm you can't see me, but I'm actually nodding my head in agreement. I'm like, yes. Well, you know what? And what's happening in my practice is that I'm educating a lot of women and men about their anatomy, more so women, because like women don't really know about where everything's located and about pleasure zones and how long it takes even to get aroused. And really interesting. I just had a case that came in. A woman came in. She's going to try to get pregnant with her husband, and they just went through this big remodel of their house, and she checked like the low sex drive. And so I said, well, tell me a little bit about that. And she's like, well, I'm not really that interested in sex. And she's like, it just takes me a really long time to get interested. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? She's like, yeah, just like, it takes a lot of work to get me aroused. And I thought, well, that's really normal for women. It takes about 20 to 45 minutes for all of our erectile tissues to kind of get engorged with blood. And that's really like, it happens faster for a male, right? Their penis gets engorged with blood, and they're very visual. So visual things, they have a developed visual centers in their brain. They respond into visual stimuli where women, we need a little bit more, I think, to become aroused, especially women, that are working and have a lot on their mind. And also fertility makes that stressful too. Like, oh no, we need to have sex tonight, and I need to do this at this time. And it's like, I got to coordinate with my partner because, he or she likes to, go to bed early or go to bed too late, and we're off schedule. And there becomes all these issues around it.
So many things. Are traveling for work, or if this is the second or third baby, you have childcare with a young one, which is exhausting. So there is so many different factors. And I think also what I appreciated in your book is that you mentioned even how, people come from different sexual backgrounds, so to speak, right? Like kind of like how we were raised to view sex, and like if there's any religious components there, that all can play a factor in fertility, which I think is just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has to find their own, where they're all at with that, right? And right now, I just watched this really funny YouTube video that was talking about gender. Not just gender and sexuality, where a dad was trying to explain the birds and bees to his son, and the son was like, "Dad, it's non-binary," and he was just using all this new languaging around sexuality, which is and gender, right?
Right.
Which is a whole loaded topic also, right? What is our
Mhm.
identity? What's our sexuality? What did we bring in from our parents, from our, what you just said, our religion, and how do we sort through that? And where do we go to get educated? Because, most that yes, high school education, I have a high schooler. He threw two pamphlets down. One said, do you want to be do you want to be pregnant when your teenage years? And the other one was like, do you want to get a sexually transmitted infection? And I thought, oh,
No and no.
yeah. And that puts a lot of, that doesn't really talk about the intimacy and beauty of sensuality and sexuality when you're ready to conceive and when you find the right person, how it's a really beautiful, magical experience. Yeah. It just puts that sort of negative spin on sexuality, which is sad. Yeah.
It is sad. There's a lot of fear because they're like, well, just don't do it. Abstinence. I know I was raised that way. Like, oh, you don't have sex until you're married. So, sex as a teenager was very shameful and wrong and dirty and all these things. And it wasn't, I'd love to be able to teach my son differently than I
Yeah.
was
Of
taught.
course, my son is like, Mom, please don't talk to me about this subject.
He's like, I don't want to go there.
I don't want to go there, right? But another thing I see with male and females, and this is coming up more and more in my practice, and so maybe listeners will, maybe someone can relate to this. But I'm finding that because of this, like everybody's preventing pregnancy, so males don't always know how to ejaculate into a female, and some males actually have a difficult time ejaculating into a female when it's that time. And I people send me notes and tell me about this. And there can be many, many reasons for that, obviously. But, that's
Right.
something that people don't talk about.
Right. Well, if you've been spending your whole life trying not to get somebody pregnant, then it's like, it is kind of like ingrained, like, oh, now I do it.
Right. Or you like ejaculate into a condom and then all of a sudden the condom's not there and then you don't know what to do. Or you have you masturbate and ejaculate, or pull out, and so that's how you learn to ejaculate. So if you don't know how to let go into a woman, or maybe you're on a
Right.
medication that that makes it very difficult to ejaculate, or so many factors, and it's I don't know people don't talk about it, and then they just do IVF instead.
Right. They kind of skip right all over that. And I think that this is, people that are having fertility challenges listening in, there's a really beautiful opportunity here to to go deep with your partner and have some of these somewhat uncomfortable conversations because they're healing, right? Like maybe, you gave an example in your book, like maybe the husband really doesn't feel ready to become a dad,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Uh-huh.
And so there's all these subconscious beliefs and thoughts that come, maybe from our early childhood that are really shaping our behavior when it comes to the actual act of making a baby.
Absolutely. And people sometimes think that, if we just have a baby, this will, it'll fix everything, right? I know. I'm a woman. I'm programmed to have a baby, right? But it doesn't
Right.
necessarily, if you have kids, that it's actually, once you have kids, it makes the relationship part a little more complicated because now you have your energy going toward a third or fourth or fifth kid, right? And
Right.
or person, I should say. And so it's challenging. So the things that you don't work out, they're still there. They don't get fixed, right?
No, they get more escalated, in my opinion. I have a 2-year-old son, and I could see how, as excited as we were to have a baby, it was extremely stressful. And any stressor, whether it's a child or, baby, or like, renovating or moving or, whatever is going on in our life, these life stresses, it puts your relationship in, it tests the relationship, I should say. It really shows how good is your communication. How do you operate under stress?
Yeah, kids can definitely challenge us, and it's beautiful and wonderful. It's great, but the things that you don't deal with when you just slap a Band-Aid and don't really deal with the intimacy issues that you're having with your partner, they come back. They don't just go away, right? I have patients that don't have intercourse at all. and they're just doing IVF, and that's an issue, right?
Wow. Yeah, totally. So I think that is really relevant, where you talk about like, even they're just so stressed. They're just like, okay, well, we just kind of given up. We're letting, and it's so medical. So like, there's really no passion or intimacy there at all when you're dealing with something like IVF or IUI. And so, I think what's interesting is I think you have some kind of sexology training, right? Like that you've brought that into your acupuncture practice.
Yeah, I became a certified sex coach in my inquiry into a more looking more in depth at female and male sexuality, so I could become more versed in the language, so I could feel comfortable talking to my patients about it, because they were asking me all these questions, and I thought, well, I better do a deep dive. So I did, and it was fascinating and enlightening, and about my own self and my own sexuality.
Sure.
So I can be comfortable speaking with patients about theirs and meeting them where they're at, most importantly.
Right. So if somebody's listening in and they're realizing, yes, I need to work with like a professional to be able to have these types of conversations, because sometimes it's like a little bit too hard to just do it with your partner without having like a coach or therapist. How's a good way for people to find somebody who can have these types of conversations with them?
There's, there are sex therapists and sex coaches, and it depends on, the level of what you need, right? Most therapists don't get a lot of training in sexuality, as most MDs don't at all. I think MDs are like 20 hours or less, and most therapists are 10 hours of less. So you probably want to go and find someone who has qualification, ASEX training, or some type of training in sexuality if you need therapy. There's also sex coaches, which is different from therapists, which kind of move, more coaching like on moving things forward and not looking at maybe the underlying emotional, looking backwards at your childhood. That would be more of a therapist's view. Yeah.
Right.
People just need help in trying to figure out like there's a solution. Like I like to give my patients exercises, intimacy exercises to do, and give them solutions to problems that they can actually use in the bedroom and beyond.
Right. So in your book, you have some like breathing exercises. You bring in some chakra work and acupuncture points. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of those exercises?
Sure. The Eastern traditions are really magical because they deal with energy, and that's really what we're made of. And that's really, energetic medicine talks about, like touching people and, touching each other. So I even just doing the chakra exercises or doing touch, a lot of couples forget about sensual touch. Yeah. There's, I think there's become such a focus on like, sex below the waist, penis and vagina, that there's, intimacy is like sometimes just stroking the face. And even looking back at the Kama Sutra, which is, talks about a lot of like sexual positions and intimacy and creativity. They have exercises where you just, you stroke the face, you touch, the ears, like you become an explorer of your partner. But we forget to do that sometimes, exploring everything besides just getting right down to penis and vagina. And there's also Taoist practices where you do just like, you put your hands not even on your partner, but on top, and you just feel their energy with your hands. And, just kind of working with their energy field, which is not a Western concept, right? So, slowing everything down, if I had to give one sort of message, it's like, let's make lovemaking slower. Let's slow everything down. Let's make baby making slower, where we just get to look forward to it because it's this really intimate connection that, couples get to have with each other, as opposed to like this pressure timing. Oh no, it's baby making sex.
Right. I did love that year. That is like brilliant. That like the number one thing is to slow down. And it's just, so I think for people listening in, if you're like, oh, how can I do that? I'm already feeling like overwhelmed and I have so much to do. It is really like, it's like you would schedule anything. You schedule dinner or date night or whatever. You carve out that time maybe after date night, to have that connection with your partner. And you mentioned some different like supplies that can be
Yeah.
brought into the bedroom to help create even deeper intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had so much fun really writing this book because I got to interview like sex toy experts, and I got to, take a little excursion to a sex toy shop and just like look at all the fun little things that can kind of like make things a little more exciting in the bedroom. Like it can be fun, right? Massage oils and aromatherapy and, lights. I mean, it doesn't have to be so, it doesn't have to be so difficult, right? It can be easy, right? But we forget. I did too.
Yeah. And I think that's what really stood out to me, is how, a lot of people, when they're really in the, the midst of like really feeling this desperation, my area, we have a lot of people over 35, right? Couples that are wanting to now start a family. So there's this pressure of like, oh, the clock is ticking, and it creates a lot of stress, and they're already under stress, right? From work and other life situations. So anything we can do to help balance our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system and, get out of that fight or flight. We're not being chased by a tiger. We don't have to like, get the job done in as far as the sex act in 10 minutes. Like, it's just like, we don't have to put these additional pressures on ourselves if we really just, make it a priority. I think that's really what you're saying here, is you're making the relationship a priority, communication. And I can see why, beyond conceiving a healthy baby, how there's so many other positive attributes for this marriage and relationship that, will come from that.
Yeah. When you're talking about the parasympathetic and sympathetic, I just sort of flashed on orgasm, which is, some women don't orgasm and some women do. And, you don't need to orgasm to make a baby, right? I mean, but it's nice if you can. But just in this, what happens when you orgasm is like all critical thinking, like the amygdala, that's the kind of like, analyzing everything, and it's, it leading to the fight or flight response, the critical thinking, all of that like disappears. Like your brain shuts down in an orgasm, right? If we want to balance our nervous system, I would say like have more orgasms.
No, I like that advice.
Yeah, I mean, but really, it is like I mean, I think that there's so many things of like when you have orgasms that you are connected to the one. It's a spiritual experience, and I think that's because our mind shuts off for a moment in time.
It goes to like another dimension.
Yeah, it's like this. It actually physiologically it does. So if you're struggling with orgasm, I know I have a chapter in my book around orgasm. There's it's like experimentation, and it's again, it's not a striving like I must have an orgasm, because that already defeats the whole purpose. It's really a letting go. It's spending time plumping up those tissues for women and then having the release. And it doesn't have to be this like life-changing moment, but it's the release. It's that connection. It's that where critical thinking goes away.
So as you're saying that, I'm just, realizing how connected that is actually also to birth. Because I know when I was giving birth, like my brain was in another dimension, right? My mind was not like on this ground.
Yep.
And there was this letting go. There was surrender. It was very vulnerable. It was very opening. I mean, and so there's so much. I mean, there's even movie Orgasmic Birth, right? We can see how that there's such a connection there. So it's so cool. Like when you think about a pregnancy from the start to the end, how they kind of are quite similar.
Yeah. I just met someone who told me she had an orgasmic birth, and I was in awe that it can happen, right? I don't remember anything. I remember every detail about my birth, but I saw pictures later, and like I have no idea. I was so inward. I had no idea that there were pictures even being taken of me. It was a profound experience. So yeah, it is love, and the Chinese concept of being really healthy. I want to say that we talk about Jing, which is kind of our prenatal inheritance from our parents, right? The quality of their energy when they like really their DNA that they pass on. And this is generation after generation after generation. So we want to be healthy, body, mind, spirit, because we want to pass that love and good health onto our offspring. It's not like, let's just have a baby at all costs, right?
Right.
We want a healthy baby. So the more that we can take care of it's not just our physical, it's our mental and our spiritual. When we can really align all of those together, we really pass on this beautiful energy to our child. And they, in turn, will pass it on to their children.
Right. And it's very much like that seventh generation thinking. And it's not just the short term, make a baby, but it's really like, what kind of legacy are we creating here? And we know, like, from an epigenetic perspective, there's a lot of stressors, right? Physical, chemical, emotional stressors in our current lifestyle, but there's a lot that we can, have an impact on and mitigate prior to making that baby.
Right. I mean, infertility is stressful. There's just no doubt about it. It is for a lot of women and men. And so how do we deal with that and not be stressed about being stressed? That's a big one too, right? I shouldn't be stressed. Right. I shouldn't be stressed. Like sometimes it's just applying, mindfulness also to our experience, just sort of like loving the uncertainty, being okay with uncertainty and not knowing how things are going to be. I love that idea of just loving where we're at.
Yeah. I mean, that's good life advice. And certainly I feel like sometimes easier said than done, but really something that we can consistently put into practice. Right. And for me, that's where I find like a meditation practice is really helpful because it helps me be more comfortable with uncertainty.
Me too. I second that. All these concepts are easy to talk about, but we take baby steps. We try new things. We try on that idea of really opening our hearts and being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I have to work on it too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, oh, I want to just be really angry and say something to my partner and, because he said something, but then I have to go, okay, take a deep breath. What's underneath that? Like, I really want to come from a love heart place.
Yeah.
And that takes practice.
Yeah, it takes a lot of practice for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. So as we're even speaking about all this, like I think about some of the women in my office, they work in Manhattan, they have super successful, high powered professional lives. And there's a lot of certainty that comes with achieving that level of professional success. And now let's say they're 38, 40 years old and they're like, I want to become a mom. I can see why there could be such a challenging transition to exactly what we're talking about of surrendering and acceptance, and not being able to necessarily control the outcome here.
Yeah, I see the same women in my practice, right? They're very, very successful women, and some are single and struggling with what they want to do with having a baby, and if they want to freeze eggs or at 38, 39, 40. I feel like, that's why I love working in fertility, because it's one of the areas where there is so much uncertainty, and I tell my patients that it's a journey, right? Life is a journey. We don't know what's going to happen. We have to live moment to moment in the present awareness, with love to let life unfold. And easier said than done for sure. Mm-hmm. But it's worth practicing.
It is worth practicing. And, I think it's something where what we're speaking about, is certainly not just only applicable to fertility. So, these types of things, I feel like when there's challenges in our life, there's an opportunity for us to grow as a person. Right. And there's a lesson to learn from it. So, and when you're working with women, I mean, I some of the advice you mentioned was just slow down. That was, I think, a big part. And that's helping with the parasympathetic nervous system, especially when it comes to sex. What else? I mean, certainly self-care is part of that. But I think it's interesting. You were even mentioning your own journey where it almost became self-care became like a chore. Right. Where it was like, I have to do all these modalities in order to get pregnant, but coming from a place of, I don't know, chore? Did it feel like a chore?
Yeah, sometimes interesting. My fertility patients, they're like the best, they're most amazing patients because they want to do everything.
Right.
Like sometimes too
Overcommitted,
much.
right?
Yeah, like yeah. I mean, they're like so they're using the same model that got them success in the outside world with their job and career, and they're trying to apply it to fertility. And look, sometimes it works. Like I have some patients that have like really, they amaze me what they're doing. But I want to say that the stress levels are high. And, I've seen people who really like did everything, and were really, really stressed. And then they got pregnant and their pregnancy had difficulty,
Right.
and like, it doesn't go away just because you get pregnant. And then they had difficulty with their babies. I mean, it's a lot of uncertainty. So you want to find the middle path. I think I'm always trying to strive for the middle path. I just had a patient who was talking to me about, all this conflicting information about eating, about what's good for fertility. She had some healer tell her that only plant-based diet for her, and she shouldn't do any animal protein. And it's like, okay, and I just looked at it, I was like, it's not a one size fits all approach. Individually, we have to look at ourselves, our lifestyle. And Chinese medicine does that really beautifully by looking at the patient particularly and seeing like, what's the best diet for this patient? And, people with like pale tongues and no energy and pale, like maybe being a vegan isn't the right approach. Maybe they do need some animal protein and some blood nourishing. So this idea of finding a middle path, it's not like, it's not like we must do everything and be really stressed about it. Right. I don't know that that's really good too. And that's how it becomes, I think it became that for me. Like I was trying to do everything possible and just finding myself in a whirlwind about it all. So I think it's better to, again, slow down and find a middle path. Like, yeah, I'm going to have a piece of dark chocolate and it's not the end of the world, but I'm going to try to not have sugar that much. I don't want to, sometimes perfection isn't great either. It's just too stressful.
Yeah, it is. It is. What are your thoughts? Because I get this question sometimes in my office for women that are actively trying to get pregnant and, maybe they've cleaned up their diet a little bit, but their lifestyle is like, oh, I have a glass of wine with dinner every night, and they kind of just continue with, kind of like living the same, right? But wanting to get pregnant. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think when we want to have a child, as I was mentioning before, we want to be our optimum.
Right.
It's really like bringing forth the optimum you so that whatever the conception issues are. So probably drinking every night, is probably not the best thing to do for trying to conceive.
Right. That's my thought too.
I think it's like, it's like people drinking lots of coffee.
Yeah.
Like they're having like 4 cups of coffee a day. No. Too much caffeine, not good for fertility.
No,
right?
Not at all.
What's the best? Yeah. So it's sort of like getting back to what's the best, healthiest you, and then if we're looking at people who drink a lot of alcohol, if I really unwind that, it's usually people who are really stressed and working a lot and they don't know what else to do to calm their nervous systems.
That's right.
And so alcohol seems to be the go-to. So it's peeling back the onion and going to the root of why are they drinking so much in the first place? Mm-hmm. What's going on? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's really mindful advice there. And there is, I think like with any type of, even like people will be like, well, that's not really an addiction, but there is like, well, then stop drinking, and when I've said that to some patients, they're like, well, I'll stop after I'm pregnant. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you stop now or drinking caffeine, So I think there is an opportunity to be aware of what's going on. And then there's so much that can be done nutritionally and with herbs to help support the adrenals and the whole endocrine system, which I feel like is probably quite off balance if people are really feeling the need to consume those types of products on a daily basis.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you.
Yeah. So do you have, give us maybe a success story of a woman, or I shouldn't even say a woman, maybe a couple, they both came to you, to your practice with fertility challenges, and walk me through what you did with them.
I have so many women right now who are about to give birth. So I actually had a couple who came in. She's about to give birth any moment, and he had like very low sperm count, like very low, like they call it azospermia.
Wow.
Like they couldn't find any sperm, and there was no reason for this.
What?
So there wasn't they couldn't find a reason why he had low sperm. So sometimes when people have low sperm, it's because, they have maybe a blockage or they have a genetic preclivity. They couldn't find it, but he had low sperm. So he came in and I worked with him a lot, and the couple they're amazing, but both of them are very high anxiety, like very, very high. So when I work with him, it was about trying to reduce his anxiety and try to also get his sperm count up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And then in the process of working with him, what started coming up is this anxiety was bleeding into sex and premature ejaculation. And so that was really interesting. And I think it was hard for him to talk to me about it a little bit because of, but he really noticed that this was going on and found a male, a sex therapist to work with in our process of working together, which I was very, very happy about.
Wow.
Yeah. And I worked with him, and in the process of working with him, his sperm went up, which was great. And I also worked with the wife, and she was very anxious, and she had some special kind of health concerns that were different. And so worked with her in getting her eggs, and they had to do an IVF because his sperm was so bad. But the first one worked, and they transferred, and they're about to deliver probably any moment now. But it was lovely because it was unfolding both of them and giving them tools to help their relationship and also to deal with stress and anxiety. That isn't, like we both mentioned, that it doesn't go away when you have babies.
Right.
At all.
At all.
So at all. It maybe gets worse, I think, because now you have another person to take care of. But I gave them tools and some practices, also meditation tools and just things what they could do to manage their anxiety. And I've just noticed so many changes in them. So that was a success story that just happened.
Oh, that's so cool. And even though I know you said they conceived through IVF, ideally, I'm hoping they're having intimate, passionate sex as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, that they started spending more time going on little mini vacations together and carving out more intimate time together. I've noticed even in their pregnancy, before their pregnancy. And yeah. And, IVF is I have no problems with IVF. This is a couple who had to do IVF. Yeah. And it's a blessing that we have Western medicine. It helps a lot of people. But I think this marriage of Western and Eastern medicine is beautiful, right? Maybe just if they had just done Western medicine, maybe they wouldn't have had the outcome that they did and the support that they so needed. So, yeah.
Yeah. And even in a lot of ways, and I can see how this is setting them up to be more successful as parents, right? Like if they're able to manage their stress level, their anxiety, that's certainly going to help with parenting and having a newborn.
Yes. It all translates. The same stuff we've been talking about in getting pregnant is the same stuff we're talking about as she's getting ready to deliver.
Right.
It's all the same, right? It's like learning to be with the unknown, because look, when you're about to deliver, it's unknown unless you schedule, even if you schedule a C-section,
Still unknown. Yeah.
It's so unknown. You never did this before if it's your first child. And so this preparation of being in the unknown, if you're trying to conceive, also carries forth to being in the unknown of giving birth.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
So it's all the same.
It's beautiful. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I do, because I'm a lot on Instagram these days and looking to see like what women are interested in and what's going on. And I'm really shocked at the amount of negativity that I see around women and their bodies and how they talk about their own infertility. It's like I don't even want to mention some of these sites, but it's just all negative. Like it's just negative about it. Like, even the word failure, right? I failed, so many cycles, and I'm a failure, and there's just so much negativity. And I guess I want to say that, life is a journey, and everybody's learning and growing all the time in difficulty. And if you're having fertility issues, it's the opportunity. It's like making lemonade out of lemons. It's an opportunity to open your heart, to be very, very compassionate about everything you have to go through, and like loving, I mentioned earlier about loving the negative thoughts, like loving the way that you go through it, and making sure you sort of look at how courageous you are if you're going through fertility, because it takes a lot of courage. Or if you're having difficulty, with intimacy with your partner and you're learning how to communicate about this, like, wow, you have to pat yourself on the back. Like, you're being courageous. You're taking a step into the unknown and approaching fertility from this different positive place, as opposed to like, I'm a failure and I don't know how to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that is really important, I think, because that mindset, certainly we can manifest, right? Whatever can come from that. And if we do stay stuck in that, like, I'm a failure, I'll never have a baby, right? Mindset, then that's what you can create for yourself, right? So the power of our thoughts and our beliefs, and certainly also how we put it out in the world. And also, like, I guess also the other thing I think that does come up, I've seen a lot, is shame around like miscarriage, like multiple miscarriages. So a woman can get pregnant, but can't, let's say, sustain the pregnancy, and they don't want to talk about it. Because there's shame, right? And it's just like, I feel like there could be so much healing there if they were, if there was more comfort with sharing, or their safety, if they felt safe sharing.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of patients with reoccurrent miscarriage. In fact, one of my patients who's had like 5 or 6 miscarriages is pregnant right now. She's just very early on. It's like she's the farthest she's been. But you know what it took for her, and it's so cliche, but we had to really work on her, like, loving and being, again, what you just said, like, sort of not being shamed about what her miscarriage, like, she wasn't broken because she had a miscarriage, and really working on letting go of all of that and getting into loving herself. That's really what she worked on. And she went to like a meditation retreat, and I just saw this amazing woman emerge, and then all of a sudden she got pregnant. And I want to say, like, it's cliche, and I know women don't want to hear that, and I see that it's not, it doesn't always work this way for everyone, but the loving of yourself and knowing that miscarriages are very, it happens. I've had them. I've had 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's devastating, and but to hang in there and just, again, be compassionate with yourself in the journey.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well, Denise, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed our talk.
Me too. Thank you so much.